gari sari dari re sari da pada sari da pa ma ga pada sari re ga gari sari dari re sari da pada sari da pa ma ga pada re sa da ga gari sari dari re sari da pada sari da pa ma ga re ga pada pa ma ga re ga pada sari da pada sari re ga sari da sa ni da pa ma ga re ga pa ma ga.
The legend of Goda, who became Andal, is not only restricted to Tamil country and with Tamil people. By the time it became the 10th century, Goda's legend grew. This beautiful, heartbreaking story of this young girl who composed these fabulous poems in adoration of Krishna Ranga had captured the imagination of many rulers for successive centuries. Now, Andal is as beloved in Karnataka with the Kannadas and in Andhra with the Telugus. In fact, there are so many temples in Andhra country where the Tirupavai is chanted and sung every day in Margazhi, and there are many Telugu families for whom Andal is their Kula Deivam. Now, much of this, the credit for this and the popularity of Andal's legend goes to the 16th century great emperor Krishnadevaraya. It was called the golden age of Kannada and Telugu literature during his reign. And he was such an ardent patron of the arts and such a staunch Vishnu believer that he donated generously to expand and extend so many Vishnu temples throughout South India. My own ancestral temple, Tirukurangudi, has visible examples of the munificence of this ruler of the Vijayanagara Empire. Krishnadevaraya was also a poet, and he composed a classic called Amukta Malyada, which means the giver of the worn garland, inspired by this beautiful, emotional story of Godai, Andal. His heart was so captivated by the innocence and the utter devotion of this girl's story that he wrote his own version. And in this, I have to tell you, for so many of us who feel that Andal's story was so one-sided, her love letter was never returned, Krishna never paid attention to her until the very end, and maybe her heart broke, maybe the intensity of her passion was too much for her young body to bear, maybe she just burned away like camphor. But here Krishnadevaraya gives it amplification. With his royal eye and his imagination, he describes so many different incidents in Goda's life that it's almost as if he has worked through all the blind spots of her initial story, legend, and he's given life and a 360 dimension to her formerly silhouette of a story. Let me read you some examples. Goda's Beauty is the title. Her body had a golden glow. Her lips were a bright, bright red, and her face was clear as the moon. Her dark and lustrous hair, thick and heavy, surpassed the beauty of big black bees. Now, Andal doesn't really describe herself and her beauty in great detail in any of her verses. All she says is, I'm ready, I'm perfect and ready for Krishna. But she doesn't go into this kind of third-person description. Krishnadevaraya goes on to say, Goda's brow outshone the mark of married women. Thick black curls against a fair white forehead. He also does something really interesting. He gives life and names to Goda's friends, because we don't know any of Goda's friends, right? When she goes to wake them up in Tirupavai, she calls one Pei Penne, mad girl. But we can only sort of differentiate what kind of friends they are. But here he gives them names. One is called Marali, one is called Harini, one is called Shragvini. And the three of them engage in something like the Ninda Stuti, which means that they tease Goda and says, why are you in love with this person? You know, he insulted Surpanakha and she was mutilated. And do you know, as Krishna, he was never faithful to one person. So he had too many friends, dalliances. So they engage in this kind of banter with Goda, which we don't have in the original compositions of the Natya Tirumari or the Tirupavai. This is such a beautiful book because for me, it not only extols Periyarvar Andal's foster father and gives him the glory that he deserves as a great intellectual and a poet, and also sets the background for the famous Tirupallande, Pallande, Pallande, Pallairatande, that's always chanted at the beginning of any Sri Vaishnava ceremony ascribed to Periyarvar. So he gives his story as well enough weight before moving on to Andal. And the way he describes Andal's wedding, the way she is perfumed and jeweled and bedecked, and finally when Vishnu embraces her and takes her into the bedchamber, I thought it was so beautiful. It gave all of us who grew up with Andal wanting to know why there was so much sadness in the later part of her poems, why there was so much heartbreak, and most important, why it ended so abruptly, where it felt as if there needed to be more, where Krishnadevaraya concluded it for us and gave us a complete story of Goda, a girl who became Andal, the goddess.
Re ga pa da sa ni da pa da ga re sa ni da sa ni da ba ma ga re ga pa da ga re sa ni da sa ni da ba ma ga re ga pa da ga re sa ni da sa ni da ba ma ga pa da ga re sa